What's up, guys? We're going to be taking a look at this lab, weak isolation on dual use endpoint. So we've logged in as one of the default users, Wiener, password, Peter. We're at the account section and we have the functionality of changing our password. So let's type in the current password, which I've actually set currently to pass, the new password, which we'll set to Peter, the original password. Let's choose change password and we're going to capture the post request in Burp Suite. So here is the post request captured in the repeater. We can see we have the username parameter in the request body, Wiener, current password, pass, new password, Peter, new password, Peter. If we send that again and we render the response, we get current password is incorrect. And that's because we've already changed the password at this stage. If we set current password to Peter and then set the new password to pass, we can set the password back to pass. Let's submit that to the back end. Password changed successfully, so we can see how this post request works. Now, what if I didn't know the password for an account, but I still wanted to try and change the password so that I could then access that account? Let's see what happens if we provide an incorrect password. We get the response, current password is incorrect. Now, this is where the lab description dual use endpoint comes in. A dual use endpoint is typically a piece of code or a root on a web app that actually handles multiple functionalities. So we have a root /myaccount/change password. It's a post request. And ideally this root should only do one thing. It should change the password. But if I wanted to, I could configure the web app where when I post to change password root, many different things could happen, perhaps based on the parameters that were supplied. So if I include one set of parameters in the post request body, this endpoint performs one piece of functionality, whereas if I send different parameters in the post request body, that endpoint does something completely different. Now, while it's possible to code web apps this way, sometimes those pieces of functionality could bleed over into each other. And this is where we get weak isolation in the lab description. You see, this particular root is obviously configured to work, even if it doesn't receive this full set of parameters. In fact, we can completely remove the current password parameter from the post request body. Let's now submit that to the backend. Password changed successfully. In other words, if we don't include current password as part of the post request body, it doesn't even bother to check what the password is or whether we should have legitimate access to this account. In fact, we could say it's performing a completely different piece of functionality based on the fact that it's receiving a different set of parameters in the request body. It's almost as if in the code, there's an if current password equals set, verify the password, but if it's not set, just carry on with changing the password. So although it is possible to securely code dual use or multi-use endpoints, it's usually not considered the best practice. We have one root, it does one job, and it does it in the securest way possible. As soon as you have an endpoint performing multiple pieces of functionality, it gets a lot harder to lock it down. So now we should actually be able to change the password of any user because we don't need to provide their current password as part of the post request. So we set username to administrator and we're changing the password to pass. Let's send that to the backend. Password changed successfully. Okay. So now we're here at the login page, username administrator, password pass, which we've just set without needing the original administrator password. We've successfully logged in. Let's head to the admin panel. And as usual, it's Carlos that gets it in order to solve the lab. So let's delete Carlos. User deleted successfully. Congratulations, you solved the lab. Let's just stick to two very simple key takeaways here. As the attacker, make sure you play around with the parameters in the post request body, including removing the parameters entirely to see how the web app responds. And secondly, as the defender or the web developer, try and avoid dual use endpoints. Have a single endpoint for a specific job. And when we say single endpoint, you could still have the same name of the endpoint, but maybe use a different HTTP verb. So it's okay to have a GET request that does one thing and a POST request to the same endpoint that does something completely different. That's fine. The problems start occurring when we have a POST request to the same endpoint that performs completely different functionality to another POST request to the same endpoint based on various parameters. We don't really want that. It's much cleaner to just have single-use endpoints in that case. It's a lot easier to secure. Alright, that's pretty much it for this lab. Thanks very much for checking out the content, and I'll catch you guys in the next lab.